Well, welcome to everyone who has joined us. We're going to go ahead and get started. We may have others popping in here as we go. We have with us today Derek Hackett, who is a former broadcaster now with the city of Minot as PIO since about 2016. And he's going to share with us how he gets the community engaged with the city and the mechanisms he uses to do that and the different technologies. So go ahead, Derek, if you want to introduce yourself a little further or get started explaining what it is you do and how you do it.
Sure. Thanks, Jill. Appreciate you having me here. As Jill said,
I'm just going to say, everyone, make sure that you're muted.
well, they could let them join in, right? I don't need to be the cat in the show here. In fact, I'm probably going to ask questions more than anything. There's a lot of
people should mute themselves unless they have something they want to jump in on. But this is going to be an informal kind of meeting, kind of like we normally do at our MAPC meetings. If you have a question, use the chat or jump in, raise your hand, however you want to do it, but feel free to jump in at any time. There will be time at the end too.
I'm not a terribly formal guy, so some of you may already know that. I'm seeing a lot of new names here, so thanks for joining us. My name is Derek Hackett. I am the Public Information Officer with the City of Minot. Little history, I've been here for 5.5 years, since May of 2016. I am the longest serving PIO the city's had, also the second they've had, so low bar to reach there. Before joining the city, I was a anchor and reporter with KXMC in Minot. I started there in 2013 in sports, moved my way up to news until I decided to kind of pivot into the public sector life at my current job. During that time, I was also radio disc jockey at a local radio station. I did adjunct work for Minot State, teaching editing and writing, some 101s and 201 type classes. And that's all kind of led me to this path I'm currently on. And since I've joined in 2016, the city has made pretty great efforts of sort of prioritizing communication where it hasn't before, right? The first PIO, Mark, you might remember when the first PIO, because I know you were part of the research group that said, hey, city, you need one of these after the flood. I think it was 2013. Is that right?
It was. So Audney did serve for about 15 months on a grant starting late 2011, a grant from EDA, I think, as the public information officer for flood recovery. But it was obvious both before, during, and after the flood that the city needed that PIO position. Yeah.
And me personally, I'm grateful that the city found the merits in that. But I'm confident the citizens of Minot and the surrounding area have also found value. At least that's what I tell myself every night before I go to bed, that the city finds value in our communication efforts. Anyway. We have, as a city, we've grown in the department and in the effort that we give. Today, I kind of want to share a little bit about how we try to improve the citizen experience with the government. So I'm going to ask you guys to actually just sort of humor me for a minute. I hope everyone can see my presentation. I know it tells me that the screen is sharing, but you never know with these. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. That's good. Okay, so humor me for just a quick second. I want you guys to think about government. Just use your mind's eye and think about government. What is it that what do you see? All answers are correct. You guys can chime in if you'd like to. All right. Do you usually see, white buildings, maybe giant columns? These dudes in stuffy suits, wood panel walls, things like that. Government has a habit of being sort of traditional, and that's okay. But it also has a habit of being boring, at least when it comes to engaging in attention. But it doesn't actually have to be. I want to take some time here to tell you what we're trying to do here as a city to be more engaging, to how we're trying to really push to engage, and also kind of be a little less stale and a little bit more spunky on the citizen side. So first, our strategies. For local government to actually work, we need input. This isn't news to any of you. But input's vital. We are a democracy after all. It seems that it does seem like it's becoming harder and harder to resonate with citizens, to be engaging, to kind of break through the noise. There's a lot of distractions, content floating out from various directions that you have to compete with, mixed messages and information that you constantly have to compete with. And you and me and everybody in this group as communicators, we all know this. So whether you're a reporter trying to flood content and information, or a marketer trying to get attention from your customers, or of course, government communicators trying to do all of the above, you know that it's hard to get people's attention. And it's even more so when you have stale, sterile, sometimes boring local government information. Not everything in government is sexy, but there's ways to tell those stories to make it a little bit more digestible to people, right? Breaking through the noise is hard. Engaging is hard. But whose fault is that? Is it the citizens being apathetic? Is it social media being overwhelming? Is it the local government not trying hard enough? Yeah, all of that. All of that makes it a little bit harder. All of those things are the cause. Gone are the days of sending out a press release and following up with Jill to make sure she's got it and she can run it. Now that's only part of the equation. As I've told the 3 city managers I've worked for, every traditional media channel we have is essential because they reach the people that I can't with our digital and our owned media. But we still have to use that owned media to get our message out. It's now vital for local governments to do that. You have to use advanced strategies. You have to understand your citizens, what they talk about, what they like, what they hate. Do they enjoy my tongue-in-cheek delivery at times? Or are they more serious? Do I have to water it down a little bit? You have to understand the analytics and all the things on the back end. But first you have to listen. You have to listen first, and then you can speak to get your message out. To engage citizens, you have to listen, you have to create, you have to spend time planning and committing and communicating. I'm not breaking any news to any of you guys. I know this. You all do this in some way, in your own way. This is just kind of how we view communication and engagement. So if you take away anything from this conversation, please let it be just this one thing. Government does not have to be boring. And it is a principle of ours since I came to the city of Minot. It's a goal we're still working on, and we're far from actually achieving this goal because those goalposts will continue to move constantly, but we are making progress, at least in my opinion. One of the first things that we did was sort of standardize our expectations. We did that in December of 2019. Staff presented what is now our engagement strategy to council. It's called Listen, Speak, Act. It's not earth-shattering by any means. I'll overview it. I'll give you a really quick overview in just a minute here, but I want to ask the group a question again. Please don't be shy and humor me one more time. What are you doing right now? Right this second. Anyone blurt something out, please. Eating. Anyone else? What are you doing right now? Most of you are watching me do this thing. That's what you're doing on the foreground anyway. But in the background, you're blinking, you're breathing. All of these things, they're amazing things, right? They're necessary functions that we do without thinking, but we can also do them at will. They're a requirement for existence, and it's somehow both voluntary and involuntary. That's what public engagement is for government. Even more so for the smaller local governments, what are generally considered the more responsive governments. Public engagement or communication is a required function. But so many times we have to will ourselves to do it. It needs to be more like that blinking and that breathing. It needs to be so ingrained into our existence that we don't even think about it. We just do it involuntarily and voluntarily. So for the city of Minot, we're getting there. Some projects, it's just a part of our process. I mean, Sabrina is with us here, and SRJB is a partner with the city of Minot on flood control. And we just had a information meeting last night. it's part of the process, and it's been a part of the process. Mark has worked on a lot of those processes with big projects, to do those neighborhood meetings, to have those touch points, to do all of these things. But we don't do it with everything. It's not a part of every process. It's something that is changing for us, but right when we began our biggest formal effort to make this change into normalcy and to standardize our process, the world sort of stopped spinning. When we presented our engagement strategy to the city council, it was December of 2019. Does anybody remember 2019? Oh, those were the days. I miss 2019. We did it just before COVID. What we presented was a 3-tier approach to engagement. Stop me if you heard me say this already. Listen, speak, act. Heavy in-person engagements that focused on the amount of impact a project or effort may have on the community, a method to guide our various departments of when they need to listen, to speak, and to act. Very deep efforts of informing, collaborating, and involving our citizens. But we've been in a pandemic since, so everything we planned on, all of these ideas that we laid out and strategies to take, they were flipped on their head and made a little bit harder because it was really heavily involved in interacting with the public. Focus groups and town halls and going to where they are that all stopped shortly after December of 2019. But the principles still stand. Those stood through the pandemic and into today. So listen, speak, act is the title of our engagement strategy. It's reflected in the strategy and our expectations. And as the city, we need to do just that. Listen first, speak next, act after. But we hope for similar actions from our citizens. This isn't just our expectations of ourselves. We want our citizens to be a part of this as well, to listen to our reasons, to tell us their thoughts, and to be a part of the process of governance, to act with us. Listen, speak, act is us putting our process on paper and laying out the expectations for ourselves and our community. Now it's up to us, boring government, to be not so boring. We want to avoid looking like these dudes, whatever it is they're doing. It's so easy to fall into what's comfortable, to just do what is expected, to be formulaic, to do what's safe. It's not really my style. And maybe some of you have seen some of the things that we try to do on our social media platforms. Yes, a ton of our social content is an image with an explanation, explaining the whys and the hows and the whens and the whats, but we also do a few other things. We use memes. We try to use our message in graphics. We don't shy away from, controversial subjects like who wore it better, Mayor Sitma or Tony Stark. We try to engage as much as possible, and we try to use humor when we can. Context over very nuanced topics that have been sort of rubbing at the community is important. So some of you may have seen this. It's over a year older. It's a video I have about when we opened our first roundabout in Minot. There was a lot of nervous Nellies about this new engineering thing we haven't really dealt with before. How safe would it be? How complicated would it be? So I did act a little tongue in cheek. Now, Jill and I tested this audio beforehand. So can you still hear this?
Okay. It's taken about 48 hours.
Okay. I'm gonna just let this play for a second.
Work up the courage, but today I'm going to give up my body and my soul for the sake of science. I'm gonna do it. Today, we're going to try our first roundabout. I got this. Okay, here we go. We're approaching it. Blinker, yield, blinker, done. No problem. Man, there's other cars here. Didn't think there'd be other cars. All right. Blinker. Check. Yield for traffic. Check. We got this. We got this. Look for your exit. Okay. Blinker. Check. Safely escape without harm. Check. See? That wasn't so bad.
I'm okay with being a buffoon on the internet at times if it gets our message across. And the message there was, of course, roundabouts are okay. They're not something to be afraid of. It was a how to drive through a roundabout tied in with a little humor, which, you know, goes into one of my strategies. If a tree falls in the woods, doesn't make a sound. If your content isn't interesting, if it's not breaking through, if no one's consuming it, is anyone actually reading or watching it? If you're not giving citizens the opportunity to weigh in on decisions, are you really actually engaging any of your citizens? Are you
Derek.
breathing? Yes.
There's a question in the chat from Ryan. How do you push the limits without worry of missing the mark?
Wow. Depends on what the mark is. So I'm very lucky to have the confidence of my counsel and my administrator so far that I can be a little bit more tongue in cheek. They kind of know what they're getting with me. There are things that are controversial that I need to make sure that I get sign off from. Some of that came during the pandemic. We tried to be a place where First District Health could use our footprint online for some of their messages. And, you know, I had to run that through city manager and the mayor, of course, to make sure that they're comfortable with that. So sometimes I do miss the mark. I mean, we're not going to be offensive to anybody, of course, but sometimes we do push those boundaries a little bit. And if we get there, we know where that threshold is, and we're not going to overstep that, but we will selectively choose when we push towards that threshold. If that answers your question at all, Ryan.
I got a quick one for you, Derek.
Yes, sir.
What was the traffic like on that video? How did it compare to other videos? How did it compare to other posts? What did you use to promote it?
That
what
will
did you do differently?
That video had a lot of movement, and it was a lot of organic movement. So that was solely on Facebook. That might've been on Instagram, but it was on Facebook, and we had a reach of, that was probably one of my best performing produced videos that we've had. That had a lot of reach and a lot of engagement. It was one of our more successful, and which it didn't have a lot of production value. It was shot in portrait mode with jump cuts everywhere. It's not something that I taught my students in broadcast school on what good production was. It was sort of lowbrow. So the fact that it got that kind of movement got me sort of reassessing how we might want to be doing videos. Maybe less on the back end of producing and editing and special effects, and more so authentic content, and with a little bit of humor added into that. Now, again, I can't use humor on everything. Some things it is not appropriate to be funny about. So it's got to be very selective. But something like that, something that was a design that was chosen by the community wanted a roundabout there. They're the ones. We did a whole engagement process. That was the choice that they went with, the adjacent community. It was done, so there's nothing we can do about it, but we knew that people were nervous or questioning it, so we wanted to make sure that it could be a little bit more fun, and hopefully that people saw the silly side of the roundabout instead of the new scary side, if that helps. But that was one of our more mobile posts that we've done. Does that help? Okay. Any more questions? I like questions better than me just talking. I will wrap up if so we can let Mark finish his lunch right now. So if your
Already
content
Finished already, sorry.
Okay. Well, sorry, I didn't make it in time. Well, so if your content is interesting and it's not breaking through, does it really matter? Are we breathing or are we forcing breaths? If you're not standing out, you're not getting your message out. It's a principle for business and it's just as important for the public sector. Government must be responsible. Government must be responsive. But government does not have to actually be boring. And that's our goal, at least for the city of Minot. I'm happy to take more questions as well, if anyone has anything.
Derek, I know that the city, your office does a lot of different types of communication. There's the social media, there's the videos that you're talking about, podcasts, newsletters, all kinds of things. What are you seeing the most engagement on? What are people following?
Well, those are all very different types of engagement. Our newsletters get a high open rate, but not a lot of circulation. Facebook is our strongest platform by far, with over 15,000 followers, but some of the content on there just doesn't move as well. Occasionally, some of our best performing content, if it's not a silly video like that, it is something as simple as a map with a road closure and with people conversating in the comments. That's where we get all of our actual movement on the messages, which can be, as you guys know, who manage social media, absolutely maddening. I do read all the comments and I try to respond to the more, like legitimate questions. Oftentimes I'll do that in DMs unless it's something that's really getting misunderstood.
You often go to DMs? You don't try and address it right in the moment?
It depends. It depends. If I get there and it's a very broad amount of conversation, we will do it right there in the thread because Facebook's algorithm, per our regional rep, Eva, she's been very helpful. If you don't know who your regional rep is, I'm sure we all have the same one. If you're in public sector, use that resource. They're really helpful for you to understand what works. The best way to get bad comments down and good comments up is to respond yourself on your post, and that pushes it to the top. So if they are maybe misunderstood on the comments, maybe they got some of the wrong information, I don't want to like try to embarrass anybody. I will slide into the DMs and try to answer it that way. Becky asks, what's our policy on inappropriate comments? We have a very, so when I started, I had to unblock people from our social media page because out of principle, I can't, and now there's legal precedent, right? I can't, as a government, I can't select who gets to see what our message is. We don't get to choose what our criticism is. We don't get to choose who gets our information. We have to let everyone be out there. We don't delete many comments unless there is terrible bullying, unnecessary profanity, or it gets unruly. I've never actually had that issue yet. So when things get inappropriate, that's when a DM is oftentimes utilized. And usually it is suppressed. So our policy is very conservative on how we monitor our comments. I use comments as a data source, generally, even bad comments. That tells me where people may misunderstand things. We can focus on that topic in a different way, perhaps in other posts, and try to correct some of the misinformation and misunderstandings.
So Derek, do you actually have a written policy when it comes to how to handle those? Or is it not actually a written out policy?
Let me put it as Bill Clinton did. That depends on what your definition of is. It's written, but it's not like an adopted formal policy with the city. I have it written down as a best practice for us. It's between Brian and I, we kind of share that policy. There's only 2 of us in the public information office that kind of have control over that stuff. So there's nothing that's, we went to council and had them adopt. We just have our, maybe we'll call it guidelines.
Guidelines,
Yeah.
not rules so much as guidelines. So to those, to the 24/7 nature of your posts and of the reality of social media, how do you handle, between you and Brian, how do you handle your downtime? How do you handle, explaining to your boss that I'm not going to respond to that person at 3 o'clock in the morning? How has that evolved over the last couple of years as you want the traffic and you want the engagement? How do you still live a life?
Well, my answer is probably different than my wife's, that's for sure. Because I will spend time at 9:30, 10:30 at night, sitting there and reading or responding to comments. I've never actually had any boss that I've worked for pressure me to be so responsive to be at 3 a.m. Usually pretty understanding. So we get to that when we can. Some posts, they do get away from us. They really, sometimes they get hard to follow the trail of that comment thread. And that's when it takes a lot of extra work, especially the next day, to try to decide when we interject in some of the comments. Because sometimes you have to use those posts as a forum too. Sometimes you have to let the citizens interact with each other, not just with you. So that's something that Brian and I may talk about in the morning when he gets in, and likely we already have a plan on how we're going to handle that. There's been a few instances where we were kind of taken aback by any kind of comments happening. And our engagements, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, I'd be interested. Our engagements have really gone down lately. There's a couple changes in Facebook algorithm, and we haven't been getting a lot of movement on some of our stuff. That's caused me to kind of change some of our strategies. We've been a little bit quieter lately because we're adjusting for what we're going to do in 2022, which is going to shake the way we do things up a little bit. He's out for lunch. I haven't broke that to Brian yet, because I just don't have a full plan just yet. So, but things have gotten quieter for us too, which has made it a little easier to manage, but also concerning that we might have to change things up drastically.
I'm going to continue to dominate the questions because this one's one that I've thought about for 10 years, and I've struggled with depending on the group I'm working with or the entity that I'm associated with. Some of us have boards, or some of us work for bosses who don't see the benefit of being on social media, or who aren't willing to risk the negative exposure in trying to balance out the positive potential. So what advice would you give us? I mean, how have you ever dealt with something like that? Have you ever what kind of, when someone pushes back and says, no, we shouldn't be doing that, how do you push back and say, let me prove it to you that it's worth it? I mean, what can we do to help our organizations do better when it comes to being engaged?
I have had someone want to disable comments on social media. Well, first off, especially back then, that you couldn't actually do that. Now I think you can. For governmental pages, you could probably engage individual posts, which I'm against, because that, again, those are important data points for me, which is how I presented the argument as well. I want to know what people don't know or misunderstand. This was really helpful. For an example, when the city went through 2 very, very difficult budget cycles, there was a lot of work coming from my office on how to help the elected officials understand the budget that they're approving and what questions they wanted to know and how to answer some of the very difficult finance. Governmental finance is not fun. It's not easy to explain. It's very complicated. I had to get it explained to me several times from our very competent finance staff. But I use that as an example in this instance that, hey, remember that this post that got a lot of movement and a lot of things, here's how we responded to some of these comments. And again, some of those were direct messages, took those offline. And here's how that's come around. In the very next post we did, here's how we can compare those comments. I had to do a side-by-side of, similar amount of movement on the post, but the comment sentiment was different, so to speak. So I've actually had some instances where I had to show this is why that comment section and these posts that may have some controversial decisions that our elected leaders made, right? This is how me understanding what people are saying about it help them understand.
What other social media is it important for the city to be on? Which ones do you concentrate on?
IG is our fastest growing now. Facebook's really plateaued. That's our strongest as far as numbers, but IG is our strongest as far as performance right now. And one that I'm really trying to fight off, but I think is an inevitability, is TikTok. That changes the game for how we do things, because it is like just such a visual only medium. And not just that, but there's videos involved that take a little extra thought on how you actually utilize that. Facebook, when you want to hit we have a goal of 22 posts a week that we set. When you need to hit that, you can go to the well. You're like, okay, so this time last year, we, told people that our compost sites were going to close down soon, gave them some tips on how they can utilize those as the winter starts to change. So we can go back to that again. Sometimes with TikTok, it's a little harder to recreate that. You have to do a video. You can't do a picture. You have to have it, no more than a minute. You have to make sure that there's nothing, antiquated information in there. It's harder to put links into that stuff. So that's one that I see us trying to go towards, because that's where a lot of younger people are at currently. Younger people are not going to Facebook. And while Facebook, we can't cast aside at all, because it is so widely used and popular, we have to start going where younger individuals are, or else we're going to miss them later when they become more into the demographic that we see on Facebook. Most of our Facebook followership are female, and most of them are 30 to 50 years old, generally is where that's kind of our demographics are 69% of our followers are female, and the age group is dominantly 30 to 50. 3 minutes now. Oh, you say, Ryan, 3 minutes for TikToks. I don't love TikTok. I fear it. I got one. Ryan asks, how far out is our content calendar? Well, I have the whole year filled out. Not fully, but we go through and we look at, government is a machine. Every year we know we're going out for bids on projects. So I can plan on having a project preview come up around April-ish, when we know what our bids are. We know that detours are going to start shortly thereafter. We know when our cleanup weeks are. We know where all of these touch points are. And then once I get that built out for the year, which I spent a lot of October building again for 2022, then as we get closer to each month, we'll fill in some of those spots. For our 22 posts, yeah, I mean, we'll again look at the calendar year, and if I'm short, like, it's not fixed at 22, Ryan. 22 is the minimum, not the cap. I do see less movement if we do more than 3 posts a day. Generally, one of those gets drowned out somehow, at least historically. So about a month and a half in advance is when I like to build out those weekly 22 a week. Ooh, Mary Singer. Good question. How do you engage departments to provide content and let you know about events? If you ever crack that code, I would like to know how you do that. Some departments are better than others. Some just come to us when they know they need things. We have a bigger struggle of getting information in advance. Sometimes we get departments say, hey, there's a thing happening today. And we can say, well, that's a little too late, because, if we want people to know about it, we got to get to the news and paper's not going to get it printed today. It's a lot harder to get interviews lined up when it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get people to do that. So we're trying to, that was part of this engagement strategy that we unleashed in 2019, was to get departments to start to think. So there's a 13 question toolkit for them to go through to kind of put the ownership on them to know when and how they need to engage. And then we would be a supplement or help them do that, be their vehicle that in which they drive that engagement. It's all about habit, and we just haven't gotten there yet, Mary. Jared asks, how many people have access to our accounts? Well, we have about 4 people with access to Facebook and Instagram, and then everything that I have access to, Brian has access to. So it's always 2. See, how do you handle recognition week, such as maintenance workers week or similar? Do you try to recognize things that are tied to city government, or since you likely can't please everyone, do you shy away? We don't shy away. If we know about it, we'll do it. I know that our current city manager likes to really pound all of those celebration weeks for every department that we have. Some of these departments obviously have bigger, more renowned weeks, like Public Works Week. I think it's the 3rd week in May every year. That's easy to program in. Engineering Week. I'm going to fail this test. I think that's in April. So some of those bigger departments, but if there's something nuanced, if they tell us about it, we absolutely would be out there. One thing that you'll see this if you get our newsletter too. You can sign up for that by going to minotnd.org/the-latest. You'll see a lot of faces, because government isn't a thing, it's a people. We want to do anything we try to communicate, we like to attach a face to, because people are what run the government. People are what live here. We are people, and we like to show our people doing the things that they do and promote the things that they do, because they are servants of their community. So anytime I get a chance, like a maintenance worker week or something like that, if I'm aware of it, I want to latch onto that. And that's a priority for us to actually utilize.
Derek, who else is doing a good job in government or in public work or just in general that you tend to follow? Who are other good examples of being out there from an engagement, especially maybe on the social media side, but maybe other things too?
Are you looking for something regionally or nationally, or?
Regionally, probably, because I think that might be, I'm thinking of other people that we could use to sell this reality to bosses or to entities we work with who aren't as engaged. I think the further you get away from North Dakota, the more likely someone is to say, well, that doesn't work up here.
Sure. Grand Forks does a really good job as far as a digital footprint. Fargo they have some nice resources there. I think they're still a little undermanned for a city that size. They really do a great job of polished content, but it's still very governmenty. A lot of static images, a lot of branded fonts and things like that overlaid on pictures, but their frequency is real solid. A couple communities, on the national scale that I like to follow, Lexington, Kentucky does a really nice job. Novato, California has an excellent social presence. Another one in Rose Hill, California, I think. They have a social media page for just about every department of the city. God help me if we get to that part. But they do a really good job of really creating a lot of content. So those are a couple that are on my radar. There's a whole list. I don't want to miss out on any of them operating from memory, but there are some innovative actors out there in local government. See, Mary, have you developed a style guide, fonts, logos, placement, colors to encourage uniform presence? We have one. It's just not always utilized. I will see a form used by one department that is a logo that was from the 90s or one that's skewed. It's just been really hard to get a formal policy to police that. We do have, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Canva. That's a really nice tool. We do have brand brand style kits in that for everyone who has access to our social media to utilize. The thing that we're in now is we're kind of in a transition from identity. We might be going through a very slight rebranding effort here, where it'll be more of a modernization of some of our brand logos and colors. You'll probably see a lot of that in our new city hall that we're building as well, which is part of the timing for doing that. We're trying to just kind of modernize a little bit. So once we do that, that's when I'll get a little bit more heavy handed on style guides that we have for proper use of logos and colors and fonts.
You're going to make sure, Derek, that they're not boring, right? Not like those people in your slides earlier. None of those people. None of
Those stuffy
people are
dudes.
gonna
So
come
I
over
just,
to-
that was the third picture I found when I typed in government in Google. So I thought that was really appropriate. I don't actually know those guys, so I'm not afraid to offend them from, 1774.
Okay. Yeah, but don't bring them into the new city hall. Whatever you
No,
do.
they're not invited. No, they're the only ones. Sweet beards though. Anything else, anyone?
One question I have, do you have a platform that you manage all of your social media channels on? Or are you just doing the maintenance of it just yourself as part of what you do? Since there's a lot of different platforms out there that you can do to post things and get approvals and look at things.
We've used some platforms that really, I kind of just do it freehand. I mean, with the business suite with Facebook, it's a lot easier to manage Instagram and Facebook together now. We've had Hootsuite. I didn't love Hootsuite too much for social media management. Maybe they've improved now, but I kind of appreciate being able to go to Twitter independently. So I have TweetDeck on one of my tabs that pops up when I open my browser. Same with Facebook and Instagram. So those are kind of just my main pages. So I generally manage most of those independent of one another.
Looks like you answered most of the questions.
Yeah, I mean, as best I could. Mediocre answers is all I was promising when I came into this. So I hope I at least hit that.
Yep. Well, we do appreciate you coming, taking your time
Sure.
to do this and share what you're doing with us all.
Thanks for letting me talk at you guys for a while.
I don't know if there's anyone else, any last minute comments you want to make or things you want to share about what you're doing and maybe see how it compares to what Derek's doing.
Yeah, I would love some advice from the hive mind as well. If anyone has any kind of critiques or advice for me, that would be fantastic.
Do you have any social media handles or contact information if somebody wants to get a hold of you?
Me personally,
Mhm.
I would just direct you to my email, far more responsive to email, pio@minotnd.org. Or you can direct message us on all your favorite social media platforms. We're at City of Minot. Sign up for our newsletter. That's minotnd.org/thelatest. We are just about everywhere you can find us. That's my forced plug at the end of everything. So don't forget to click like and subscribe. Turn on your notifications.
There you go. Oh, Mary asked if you maintain the city website.
I do. We have Civic Plus, which is supposed to be built for each department to have kind of ownership of their own page, but I do oversee the umbrella of it all. Yes. And we're actually working on part of the rebranding or modernization of the brand, a refresh for our website coming up in early 2022 as well.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody who logged in today, and I hope you enjoyed listening to Derek. And MAPC now is on break until January, but we'll have more programming to announce after that time. And thank you again, Derek, for joining us.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. I hope to see you in person